Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and today I'm here with George Ortega and Jamie Soden, and we're going to talk about denial today. Why do people go into denial about problems? And one of the things that I think causes people to go into denial is that they feel fundamentally responsible for what happens, and so then they try to justify that something they've done is right because they don't want to face it. And we don't. And now that we know that free will is an illusion, we don't have to feed that guilt. But there might be other reasons aside from that why people go into denial. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways this manifests. Oh, it's interesting. Derek has just went online. There's a couple of ways this manifests. One is societally, and an example of that is climate change denial. You know that scientists are telling people, listen, what we're doing, what everyone is doing, is basically wreaking havoc with the climate, and maybe could actually ultimately destroy civilization. And this is like such a horrible indictment that a lot of people can't deal with it. They can't believe that they and their friends, their family, could be doing something so horrible. So what happens, in order to kind of like, protect themselves from this powerful guilt that they begin to feel, yeah, they deny that climate change is happening. They deny that humans are happening. So, and Jamie, you had an example of this on a more personal basis, right?
Yeah, something to do with the criminal justice system, and the Bill Cosby allegations and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't just affect the climate change denial stuff. This denial stuff. It doesn't just affect that. It also affects accusations where people get accused of certain crimes that they've done, and even if they have done them, if an accusation is so severe, they'll just go into denial about it because the pleasure principle takes over, and they just don't want to take responsibility or admit to what actually happened. And we don't know if Bill Cosby did do those things to the woman or not, but the point I'm making is, even if he has done it, he's not going to admit to it because the way society views, rapists and stuff like that.
All right. So in both cases, in society denying climate change, and like I think 54% of Americans deny the climate is happening, we're causing it. And in the personal cases like Bill Cosby, because everybody believes in free will, everybody begins to personally accuse people. And so, yeah, so understandably, if you're accused of something really horrible, you're going to be afraid to admit it.
Of course, yeah. And I'm not saying Bill Cosby did do it. All I'm saying is, if he actually had done it, if is the word, then he's not going to admit to it, probably for obvious reasons, because the accusation is so severe that if he would admit to those sort of things, he knows the consequences, he knows the punishments he'll receive for such and such. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's because they know that they'll be punished if they admit they did something, which is less reason for them to admit and hide it.
Exactly. And again, the very important part of this is like, it's the free will belief that underlies the indictment. In other words, like, let's say, 20 years go by, and like finally people get it. Finally our society gets it. They're teaching it in schools, that, it's reflected in how newspapers report crime. Then I think both with climate change and with personal instances, that fear would lessen so much. Because sure, I mean, if you did something wrong, I mean, like with climate change, I think what would happen, and I hope it happens sooner than 20 years, because we need to do things more quickly. But with climate change, I think as people get to understand that no, we're not responsible fundamentally for what we're doing. First of all, back when we started, burning fossil fuels, we had no idea there was climate change to begin with. But, on top of that, just because we don't have a free will, because nothing is fundamentally up to us, it's not our fault. And like, so once people really get that, then yeah, then maybe they can start looking at the evidence. Maybe they can start, believing the scientists instead of having to resort to denial.
Yeah, I remember bringing up in a previous podcast where, or did I bring this up after it, Chandler? I can't remember, but I brought up something about terrorists being interrogated, suspected terrorists. Sorry, they were being interrogated for alleged, crimes against humanity and stuff. And I'm thinking the idea of extracting genuine confessions with torture is flawed because people will just admit to anything to escape the pain, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I guess that's true. They would tell people whatever they think that what the people want to hear, so that they'll stop torturing them.
Yeah, it's the pain and pleasure principle. The people they're going to try and move away from pain, so they'll just say something, even if it's not true, just to get away from it. It's like taking your hand away from a fire, basically.
Right, Jamie. All right, so I explained kind of like the societal, denial, but like this, I was in Manhattan for a conference about a month ago now, I guess, and I brought this issue up to a panel there, and I asked the question twice, and they still didn't get it. So like this is, this whole denial free will connection thing is a little difficult for people to get. Can you explain it like relative to the Bill Cosby case so they can hear it again and hopefully better understand it?
Well, with the Bill Cosby allegations, right, and not just Bill Cosby, but other people in general, if they've been accused of something so severe, whether it's like murder, rape, or whatever, if there's no evidence to convict him of anything, and you're trying to extract a confession from an alleged abuser or whatever, then the chances are they're not going to admit to what they've done if they believe that the consequences in return are going to be so severe that they're going to be severely punished, whether it be life in prison or the death penalty or whatever it may be. And so this creates a problem with trying to extract confessions from alleged criminals, and or just like you say with a climate change denial thing. If you tell companies that what they're doing is accelerating and contributing to the process of climate change and all this stuff, they will go into denial about it, I suppose.
Okay, Chandler, you want to kind of like reiterate? Just want to make sure that people really get this, really understand the connection.
Yeah, see, like for example, I've used the example of explaining like how if you feel that you are to blame, that you are fundamentally responsible for anything bad you've done, well then what that means is that it makes you more likely to justify what you've done rather than change. And that's like I compare it to
That's a problem.
Yeah. I compare it to the meat thing. I've used this example in previous podcasts where if I felt as if I chose to eat meat in my life in the past, well, then I would feel responsible and that I deserve to be punished. And it's kind of a weird thing because I realized, wait a minute, it wasn't my choice. It wasn't even my idea at all to grow up in a world where routinely people eat animals. And so I thought, wait a minute, I just didn't know better, and I quit and I moved on. I didn't have to feel any guilt about it at all, and that was what made the transition so easy.
Exactly. It just like it lifts this burden of like false responsibility. And Chandler, this doesn't just relate to climate change and animal abuse. Can you explain like the free will belief abortion denial connection?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, George, because yeah, I wrote a book about that, and I really don't know if I covered everything in that book I wanted to say about it, but here's basically how I explain it. People, they feel guilty, like these women, they feel guilty because everyone tells them that they chose to murder their child and that it's up to them and that they deserve to be punished and they'll go to hell. People tell them this, and so then these women, and as well as the abortionists and other people who fund abortion, they justify killing of these babies because they feel like they're being attacked, they're being blamed, and that they're being held responsible, and they don't want to be punished. They don't want they don't want to feel like they've been doing something that horrible. So instead, they find ways to justify it. And they do that by saying, oh, well, they're not really people until they come through the vagina. They say stuff like that, but but they justify it that way. They justify it, well, we're overpopulated, so we need to kill people, But here's the deal, is that some people come to realize that, well, they may have contributed to abortion in the past, but they didn't fully realize what they were doing. And there's a lot of people who have reformed it, and they've changed, and they see that it's wrong, and they don't justify it, but they try to reverse the damage done. And what's interesting about it, though, is that more often than not, they are unable to do this because they have this free will belief. And here's the problem: when you believe people have a free will, well, then you believe that they could have just chosen not to have sex, and people and that's the way I kind of used to be. I thought, well, it's just so simple. People should just choose to never have sex, and they should and all this weird stuff. And sometimes it really kind of makes me sad that people are driven by their hormones to do all sorts of things, and people are also lied to and told, well, if you use birth control, then you won't get pregnant, but it fails, and all this stuff. So these people who
it goes back to the issue with teenagers having sex and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the deal. The reason that people go into denial about abortion is partly because they don't want to get into it. They don't want to get into the subject of sex. They don't want to get into all this stuff because once you start getting into sex, well, then it just turns terrible, because then you get into people and their religious beliefs. You get into everything else, and so people, they're not willing to go that route and talk about the serious issues. So then they have to justify the killing of the babies. Because that's a way of treating the symptom rather than the prior causes of the problem that lead to it.
Absolutely. Also, with abortion, and it is related to kind of like people having sex younger. Well, actually, here's the problem, and this kind of like is also an expression of how we don't have a free will. For thousands, tens of thousands of years, human beings, women would, when they turn 13,
Hey, Chandler,
14.
can you invite Anthony into the call?
What?
Can you invite Anthony into the call? Whoever's the host of this call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Jamie, you can't do that from your end. I don't have Anthony on my on my list.
Yeah, I'll try to see if I can. Yeah, that's weird. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna try to. Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Yeah. Let's see now. Okay, I'm gonna try to add Anthony Bishop to the call. But yeah. But then I want to hear what George was about to say.
Okay, hold on. Anthony, are you there?
Yeah, I'm waiting for him to answer the call.
Okay, I don't. No, he's off. Okay.
Try again, Chandler.
No, let's forget that for now. I want us to continue with the podcast, and I want to hear what George was about to say.
And Jamie, you may be able to do that, Jamie, yourself. Just like conversation at the call, conversation very top. All right. So the idea is like for tens of thousands of years, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, human beings, women, when they turn 13, 14, 15. That's when they start having children. That's when they start having sex. That's when their hormones kick in. That's when the guy's hormones kick in. That's when things begin to happen. Now, over the last I don't think it's any longer than 200 years. That has changed dramatically. All of a sudden, you know, not only do most people, especially in the developed countries, not have don't get married and start families at 13, 14, 15. It's very, very strongly discouraged. And society is conditioning people more and more, not just to wait until their 20s, but a lot of times to wait until their late 20s and early 30s, to start having kids. And so, yeah, so like basically, this is a free will issue because human beings, our biology is not designed to wait until we're, 30 years old to start having a family. Our biology is designed to start having sex and start having a family at 15. So that's what.
Yeah, because that's when puberty finishes and stuff. I mean, I find it absolutely disgusting that, teenagers get registered as sex offenders for, having sex with someone of similar age, and that's the issue I discuss with Chandler quite, well, not often, but from time to time, I bring this up with him. And Romeo and Juliet law in some some states in the USA deals with this problem, and, that's correct because I don't think, a teenager should be labeled a sex predator just because a 17-year-old went out with a 15-year-old. That's just bullshit.
I hear you.
Yeah, and yeah, guys, this is one of the first things that showed me that people don't have free will because they are not able to turn off their hormones and the attractions they have to certain people and stuff like that. And I really wish that they could, you know, and yeah, I mean, because that's really sad because there's all these people going around believing in free will and then blaming people for feeling the things that they can't possibly do anything about. I mean,
Yeah.
and here's the thing.
Plus, recent psychological evidence has come forward that we're not really adults until we're 25 because the frontal lobe has not stopped developing until we're in our 20s. Isn't that a fact, George?
Well, yeah, I've heard it from you recently, but it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, because we don't stop growing until then anyway. But I sent you. Didn't I send you articles from the BBC and the Independent?
I'm not sure. That might have been on Skype.
I'll have to send you them later on. But that's around the time when our brain finishes frontal lobe and temporal lobe development, and our cognitive, their critical thinking skills are around the peak around there. Well, should be around the peak. You know.
All right. One thing we need to explain is like overcoming free will belief doesn't solve everything. In other words, we're basically making the case that to the extent that society, that everybody understands that no one has a free will, we're going to be a lot more understanding and compassionate toward people that do wrong. Especially like with crimes like Bill Cosby and all. But we have to just also clarify, for example, we're going to need some form of deterrent, to crime, to people committing crime. So there'll have to be some kind of punishment or all. So Chandler, that given that, what does change? What changes? Even though like we do have to punish to a certain extent, what changes as society overcomes this belief in free will?
Yeah, well, after people quit believing in free will, the desire for revenge disappears because you understand people don't deserve anything. I mean, really. And so yeah, that's a benefit right there. So you no longer hate people in the way that only free will belief allows you to do. So that's helpful, and obviously there's still problems in the world, like George said. Even without the belief in free will, I mean, there's still problems that have to be dealt with. However, our efforts can all be about what will deter people from doing a specific crime. That's the thing.
It's not just sex crimes though; it's other crimes as well. You know what I mean? And there was this remember this daycare center video that I sent you a while back, Chandler Klebs, where Chris Hansen brought up this guy's history of assault and battery and stuff. Now, this guy wasn't a sex predator and he wasn't convicted of such, but because Chris Hansen was on To Catch a Predator, some people who are not very intelligent might get the wrong impression about the guy he was interviewing. And plus, this guy had not reoffended in 13 years. You know what I mean? His offences of assault and battery were from the 90s. And for him to go in on live television like that and to raise someone's criminal history is a bit. There was something off with that. Me and WSD time, we noticed that that probably wasn't the best course of action, because that might stir up a lot of emotions.
Well, Jamie, explain how our world overcoming free will belief would have changed that situation so that wouldn't have happened or wouldn't likely have happened.
Well, if we don't apply the free will paradigm, then the chances are people like Chris Hansen and other like media hosts wouldn't go doing things like that, and especially to a crime that's completely unrelated, crimes against children. You know what I mean? This crime, this guy's crime was against an adult. So, and it just wasn't.
So you're saying that the person's bringing it up was really a hateful act that just wouldn't have come about if the person understood that the person who committed the act just wasn't fundamentally responsible. That if the guy knew that the person didn't have a free will, he wouldn't resort to wanting to hurt this person, especially for no good reason.
Well, I don't know for sure whether it was to hurt him or not, but what I do know is if he knew that this guy didn't have a free will, then he would have respected his privacy more. Know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Because I mean, if you haven't reoffended in 13 years and your crimes had nothing to do with kids, then I just don't see the connection. I would not see the reason to bring up someone's criminal history when they've reformed. And this guy was working in a daycare center, true, but he wasn't convicted of molesting kids or attempting to, So.
All right. Well, Chandler, you were explaining, how things will change as people, overcome this belief in free will, relative to denial. You want to continue with that because that's important. People have to understand this overcoming of the free will have profound consequences throughout society.
Yeah, here's what I think would happen in a world where people understand that everything has a cause, including all human decisions have a cause. Well, because what that will do is that people will investigate, not interrogate people, but ask them, well, what caused you to do this? What would you have done something differently if something had been different in your life? Not so that when you talk to people who have done something wrong, you talk about it from the perspective, well, how can we help you to do better? Rather than, oh, you evil sinner, go to hell. You know what I'm saying? There's a huge difference there. There's a real.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Chandler, I think what you're describing is like what's also known as kind of like the good cop, bad cop policing strategy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but like a lot of times when they have a suspect, they don't know whether the person committed a crime, and they're interrogating them. They want to find information. This person will sometimes be in contact with two kinds of police officers. The first kind, who might actually go first in this, will really try to scare the person. Say, you're going to get 20 years for this. It really just, adopt a free will based attitude. You're horrible. You did this. You better be afraid and stuff, to get the person afraid, right? Then the quote unquote good cop, will come in later and say, listen, I can understand how you must have been feeling at the time. If I were you, I probably would have felt the same way, and empathizes with the person. It kind of like shows the person that he cares about him. And that is actually that's what happens as we overcome free will belief. We begin to have compassion and understanding toward the people, and police do this because they know that this good cop strategy gets people, these suspects, to say things that they wouldn't say under the free will paradigm.
Yeah, And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, people should respect a reformed criminal's privacy. If they've not reoffended in a certain amount of time, then you know you could, depending on what they've done in the past, you could assume that they were safe. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, some people have a history of theft and drugs and all that stuff, but some people come off that. I mean, you know, Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, wasn't he a druggie back in, back when he was young?
Well, I mean, you can go even more than that. This guy,
Mm.
Menachem Begin, he eventually became the prime minister of Israel and
Mhm.
was given a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Back in his 20s,
Mm.
he was the organizer of a Zionist movement back then that blew up a British hotel and killed over 200 people.
Ah.
So yeah, so in other words, like yeah, society has a history of leaving the past in the past, of allowing not just people, but like remember Germany, Japan, these were like
Yeah.
horrible countries in World War II. Now they're our best, among our best trading partners. So we don't stay in the past in terms of like holding people responsible, because as you're saying, people change.
Yeah. Of course, people change, and it's just a fact that people gonna have to get over, unfortunately. But it's how can I put this? This is very controversial. You know this. You know what I mean? We're gonna get all sorts of accusations with this, man.
Yeah, I know, but here's the deal, man. People are more likely to change when they no longer have this irrational guilt, based on free will belief. And that's the thing. And I think part of the reason, and this is just a theory that I have, um, is part of the reason that people don't like people telling people they don't have free will and that they're not fundamentally to blame is because people have this need to punish. They have this psychological need that comes from free will belief, really, I think. They have this desire for revenge, and they want people to suffer, not just in this life, but in an afterlife after they die even. And it's pretty sick. Um and that's why they don't like what we're saying, because what we're saying is that that's not right, that's not just to cause somebody suffering, like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly call drug addiction a crime, because what they do to their own bodies is, you know, how can I put this? What they're doing to their bodies is not harming other people. You get what I'm saying? Unless their drug habit is being done in front of kids, then obviously they're passing it on the wrong. They're being bad role models, basically.
Right, Jamie, we've got about a minute and a half, but I just want to make one point. Sometimes, like, laws against, for example, very dangerous drugs
Yeah.
have to do with, like, I think it's similar to like suicide. We have laws against suicide because when somebody commits or attempts suicide, they're not just quote unquote hurting themselves, they're also hurting people who are close to them. So a lot of times when people experiment with really dangerous drugs, they're really, they're affecting the lives not just of themselves but of the people around them.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they're not intentionally how can I put this? It's not the same thing as thuggery or murder or stuff.
Absolutely, it's not a malicious crime. There's no intent there
Yeah.
to harm people. I understand.
Yeah, in fact, we really need to do a podcast about that subject too, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good. Absolutely.
Yeah, Chandler actually made a very good point about the animal rights stuff. I'm glad you brought it up, Chandler, because carnivores are less likely to become vegetarian if you say that what they're doing is very harmful to the animals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was telling Jamie earlier in a talk about, how meat eaters go into denial, because they still believe in free will and they feel like, oh no, I'm a horrible person because I've been causing this suffering. But they didn't know better. So I try to take the good cop approach, as George would say, with these people.
Excellent. All right, I guess we're about time. Chandler, you want to wrap this up or?
Yeah, you've been listening to the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, and I guess, hope you enjoyed this. There'll be more. Bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.